3 doctors, 3 different years, 3 different emergencies. All of them worked at the same hospital. And when I finally got them in the same room, the 4 of us around a table at a coffee shop on NW 23rd on a Tuesday morning last fall, one of them started describing the light. The second one finished the sentence. I've sat at that table probably 100 times. I know what it feels like when a sentence lands in a room and nobody speaks for a long moment. That morning, nobody spoke for a long time. Let me tell you who they are and what happened to each of them before I tell you what they said, because the order matters. All 3 of them were attending physicians at the same academic medical center in the Pacific Northwest, a large teaching hospital, the kind with rotating residents and 4th-year students in the hallways at every hour, the kind of place where you can walk for 10 minutes and still be inside the same building. I'm not naming the hospital. I'm not naming any of them by their full names. Not because I doubt what they told me. I've spent 18 months verifying what I can verify, and I'll tell you exactly what I found. But because 2 of them still practice there. What they experienced sits in a professional space that most institutions don't have a framework for. You can be changed by it privately. Saying it in a conference room, in front of colleagues who still write the same abbreviations on the same charts you do, that's a different conversation. I met them the way I meet most people now. Through an NDE support group I started attending after my own surgery in 2019. Each of them found their way to that group separately, in different months, different years. None of them knew the others were also physicians at the same hospital. I'm the one who made the connection, because 8 months after I met the first of them, I started noticing that certain phrases they used to describe what they'd seen were not just similar. They were the same. Let me tell you who they were before any of this happened, because that always matters. Dr. C was 54 when her heart stopped. She'd been an anesthesiologist for nearly 3 decades. She described her belief system, when I first asked about it, as pharmacological confidence. The more you understood how the brain generates experience, the less work you needed anything outside it to do. The event that ended this framework was a v-fib triggered by a long QT syndrome she hadn't known she had, during an emergency intubation that stressed her own cardiovascular system past a threshold that had never previously been tested. Her team brought her back in under 5 minutes. When she woke up in the ICU, the first thing she said to the attending was, "The monitor was on the wrong side." It was. The rolling monitor had been repositioned during the resuscitation to make room for the crash cart. The attending confirmed it. Both scrub nurses confirmed it. She had been on the floor receiving chest compressions, facing the ceiling. There was no vantage point from which she should have known where the monitor was. That was what I could verify. What she described next took her much longer to put into words. "There was a space," she said, the first time we spoke. "Vast isn't quite right, but it's the direction. It wasn't dark, it wasn't bright, exactly. It had its own light, not from any direction, just present. The way temperature is present in a room before you've identified where it's coming from." She looked at her hands. "And it knew me," she said. "Whatever was in that space, it wasn't examining me. It recognized me, like it had always known my name. Like my arrival, there was something it had been waiting for, but not the way you wait for something uncertain. The way you wait for something you already know is coming." Dr. N was 61 when a first-year resident found him on the floor of the physician lounge between rounds. Pulmonary embolism, a clot large enough to cause complete hemodynamic collapse. The resident found him on his right side, right knee buckled under him, left hand still loosely holding a granola bar he'd been eating. He described, approximately a month after the event, finding himself watching that scene from above. He described the color of the resident's scrub cap. He described the east window, fogged, he said, from the morning cold outside. He described the resident's specific posture in the moment before she called for help. She confirmed all of it independently. She had not been told he'd described any of it. We talked twice before he felt ready to describe what came after the out-of-body observation. He's the most careful of the 3 with language. Decades of delivering complex medical information to frightened families will do that to a person. He thinks before he speaks. He chooses words the way a surgeon chooses instruments. I was somewhere else, he said. Somewhere that made everything I'd ever stood in feel like a sketch of a place. Do you know when an architect makes a preliminary drawing? The proportions are right, the rooms are in the correct positions, but it isn't the place yet? Everything physical I've ever been in felt like that. A draft. And what I was in was the thing the draft was trying to describe. He stopped. Then, there was a quality of warmth that wasn't temperature. It was more like, do you know the feeling when someone who truly loves you looks at you? Really looks? Not at what you're doing or saying, but at you? It was that, except from the whole space, from everywhere, at once. He looked at his hands when he said that. I noticed it because I'd done the same thing when I tried to describe my own experience to my husband 2 weeks after my surgery. Something about the inadequacy of language makes you reach for the nearest solid thing. Dr. V was 47 when she went down during morning rounds. Hemorrhagic stroke, a bleed in the right posterior parietal region from a vascular malformation that nobody had known was there. She collapsed mid-sentence in front of 3 residents and a room of 15 medical students. Return of spontaneous circulation was established in approximately 4 minutes. She is the most systematic of the 3, daughter of physicists who emigrated in the early 90s. She grew up in a household where religion was described as a cognitive error, gently but consistently. When she talks about what happened, she approaches it the way she approaches a differential diagnosis. Start with what can be ruled out. I know the hypoxic hallucination literature, she told me, and she said it without defensiveness, just as a starting point for elimination. The argument doesn't hold for what I remember. The duration of hypoxia was insufficient for structured, complex visual experience, and more importantly, the quality moves in the wrong direction. Hypoxic phenomena degrade in resolution as the insult continues. What I recall gets sharper as I approach the moment of maximum clinical crisis. That's the inverse of what the model predicts. What she remembers, a sudden release of pressure in her head like something unclenching, then a space. She used the word space before I told her the others had used it. Vast, she said, light without a source, not the kind of brightness you shield your eyes from. Not white, exactly, just present. And warm, but not the temperature. It was the warmth of recognition. The space had a place with my name on it. I don't know how else to describe that. My being there wasn't surprising to whatever the space was. It was expected. And then she described a conversation she had no way of having heard. 2 of her residents, in the hallway outside the room where she was unconscious on the floor, discussing a patient named Martinez and a CT scan that needed to be rescheduled. She named both residents. She reproduced specific phrasing from their exchange. They confirmed it separately without being told what she had said. She had an active intracranial bleed at the time of the conversation. Here is what I need you to sit with for a moment. 3 physicians, 7 years of separate events. None of them had spoken to each other about any of it before I arranged that morning at the coffee shop. Vast space. Light from no single source. Warmth that was recognition rather than temperature. The feeling of being known by something that had apparently always known them. Not examined, not assessed, not judged. Recognized. As if there was a record somewhere, and they were in it, and the space around them was the record acknowledging itself. Bruce Grayson is a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia. He has spent more than 40 years studying near-death experiences. In 1983, he published a scale, 16 elements drawn from hundreds of accounts, validated across populations, applied and translated across cultures. Of those 16, the transcendent elements, the encounter with a vast environment, the sense of a presence of unconditional recognition, the experience of being completely known, appear in accounts from every religious tradition and from no religious tradition at all. The content does not change based on what the person believed going in. I know that sounds like exactly what you'd expect someone running a channel like this to say. I understand. In 22 years of ICU work, I would have said the same thing you're thinking. The difference is the data. Sam Parnia's AWARE-2 study, published in 2023 in a peer-reviewed medical journal, tracked 567 cardiac arrest patients across 25 hospitals in the United States and the United Kingdom. The core NDE content, the quality of the environment, the expanded consciousness, the sense of being known by something vast, did not differ between religiously observant patients and patients who had no belief in any afterlife going in. Atheists described the same place. They used different words for it. The place was the same. Jeffrey Long's database at NDRF now holds more than 5,300 accounts collected from over 30 languages. When his team formally surveyed over 1,000 of them, nearly 3/4 reported heightened consciousness during the experience, not diminished. Not the fragmented, degraded perception you'd expect from a brain in crisis. More alert, more present, more themselves than they'd ever been. The two words that appear most frequently across all of those accounts, translated back from dozens of languages: peace, love. 3 atheist physicians described a space of light and unconditional recognition. 5,300 people from 30 countries described it too. I need to tell you why I arranged that meeting. It wasn't scientific. I was trying to sleep. After my own surgery, after 3 minutes of asystole, after I woke up and told the anesthesiologist exactly what he'd said to the scrub nurse while I was clinically dead, and he confirmed it, I found myself doing what I had spent 22 years discouraging in patients, looking for someone who had been in the same place. My husband was kind. He believed me the way someone who loves you believes you, describing a dream, gently and from the outside of it. My colleagues were cautious. A few were supportive. None of them knew what to do with any of it. What nobody tells you about coming back from that kind of experience is that the experience itself is not the hard part. The hard part is the after, standing in the same break room, looking at the same monitors, being asked how you're feeling and saying, "Fine, thanks," because what you'd actually have to say would take 2 hours and would end a conversation that most rooms aren't built to hold. The loneliness of coming back is structural. It's not that people don't care. It's that the experience places you in a position that language wasn't really designed to help you explain. You were somewhere. You came back. The somewhere doesn't have a zip code. And the people around you live in a world where zip codes are how you locate everything. When I realized that these 3 people, walking the same corridors, eating from the same vending machines, signing off on the same patient charts, had all been somewhere, and none of them had found a single person who could hold that conversation with them, I understood the problem completely. Because I had been living it for 4 years. That morning at the coffee shop, when the second doctor finished the sentence the first one had started, when the specific phrase about the quality of the light matched almost word for word, the third one looked up from her cup. "I thought I'd invented it," she said. "For 3 years, I've been convinced I invented the whole thing." Nobody at that table had invented anything. They had been in the same space. And whatever that space is, whether it's a property of dying, whether it exists the way this room exists, whether it's something that will be there when my turn comes again, it had recognized all 4 of us by name, without hesitation, the way you recognize something you've always known. I don't know what that space is. I don't know if it has coordinates. I don't know if it's waiting, or if waiting is even the right category for something that exists outside of time the way these accounts consistently describe. What I know is what 3 physicians trained in the same clinical habits I was trained in, fluent in the same vocabulary of skepticism, described when all the clinical language ran out, and what 5,300 people in 30 languages described before them. If you've been somewhere like that and you haven't been able to say it out loud, you are not alone. There's a table at a coffee shop where people finished each other's sentences. There are more tables than you know.